The GAC Emzoom is definitely more toned down compared to its bigger counterpart, the GAC Coupe. But that doesn't mean it's boring by any means. Both cars are geometrically very interesting. Yes, the Emzoom has a more traditional grille compared to the arts and crafts project going on with the Ep.9, but it still has a lot of depth to it. The grille lowers and raises according to the surfaces, which makes the triangles inside feel almost alive. And before we start this video, I just want to give a huge thank you to the official GAC Motor Zimbabwe dealership for making this video possible. All the cars you see in this video, including some of the vehicles you spot in the background, were sourced directly from them. They've been incredibly helpful in allowing me to spend proper time with these cars, drive them, film them, and really get to understand what they're like beyond just a quick first impression. They handle all servicing, maintenance, and genuine part support for these vehicles as well. And if GAC isn't the only thing you're interested in, they also have select BYD models available too, so come and check them out. If you really want to see these cars for yourself, you can find them right here opposite KKK Tiles Eastleigh Corner, Amar Avenue and Macleary alongside Samora Michelle here in Harare. So again, massive thank you to them for helping me make this review possible, and back to the video. The vertical slats guide your eyes towards the width of the car, where they meet the headlight unit. But this actually isn't the main headlight unit. These are actually just the daytime running lights. And I just want to take a moment to appreciate these DRLs. They continue the triangular theme from the grille, and by flipping the triangles upside down, it gives the car a much more aggressive look than if they were the right way up. So you might be wondering, if the headlights aren't up here, where are they? Well, they're down here, just like on many other modern cars. This layout gives designers more freedom to play around with the front end, especially the DRLs, which have become a huge part of a car's identity. Being able to differentiate yourself from competitors is incredibly important. And since GAC is still a relatively young brand in the international market, they have a bit more freedom to experiment with designs like this. Legacy manufacturers tend to play it safe. A small line here, a little squiggle over there, because they're worried that the lights might distract from the traditional design language. Now, I've been mentioning triangles a lot, and if you really look at the front end of this car, most of the surfaces are some variation of a triangle, or multiple triangles working together to form the entire front end.
Will you be at the next Illuminati meeting?
Yeah, Portia and I are both coming.
From this angle, the car looks very aggressive. It almost reminds me of the head of a lion staring intently at its prey. And you may have noticed the orange accents right at the bottom of the front bumper. These are end plates. On a high-performance race car, they're usually there to increase front-end grip or help manage airflow down the sides of the car. And I say usually because this is an SUV. You're not going anywhere near a track in this car. These accents are specifically part of the R-Style package, and as we walk around the car, you notice more of these styling upgrades. Moving down the sides, there's a very strong shoulder line that tapers off towards the rear. Below that, you get these very sharp character lines. Seriously sharp. Careful, you might cut yourself just looking at them. Further down, just like on the Coupe, there's a bit of visual trickery going on. The lower sections are blacked out to make the car appear taller than it actually is, something many cars in this segment do. Up top, the A and B pillars are also blacked out, creating that floating roof effect. Very similar to what you'd see on a Range Rover. Then, when you get to the pillar at the back, things get a bit more dramatic. There are all these intersecting lines and triangles, creating a really interesting visual element. And if you go for the R-Style trim package, you also get a contrasting orange triangle right here. Which brings us to the back of this car. And once again, more triangles. You get 4 of them inside the taillights, which makes the rear instantly recognizable. The only other car that I know of that kind of plays around with triangular lighting like this is the Toyota Supra. Up top, there's a spoiler. Like the Coupe, it has those cool cutouts, although here they're not sculpted to mold into the roof rails like they are on the Coupe. One detail I do like is how the central light looks a bit like the rain light you'd see on a race car, just mounted higher up. Down below, you get these twin center mounted exhausts, and at first I thought they might be one of those designs that looks cool but becomes annoying the second you try loading groceries into the boot. But after actually seeing the car in person, the gap here is surprisingly generous, so it's really not an issue at all. You're not going to burn your pants every time you open the boot. And the exhausts aren't just for show either. If you go for the R-Style package, the Emzoom actually gets a valve-controlled active exhaust system, which honestly surprised me. There's even a dedicated button on the steering wheel that lets you open and close the exhaust valves depending on the driving mode. So in comfort mode or eco mode, the car stays relatively calm and civilized. But switch it over to sport mode, open up the valves, and suddenly this thing becomes way more lively than you'd expect from a compact SUV. And no, it's not pretending to be a V8 muscle car or anything ridiculous like that, but it genuinely has a proper sporty tone to it. There is actual character there. In fact, take and listen to this. And paired with this rear diffuser, it all helps sell the personality of the car. It's not quite as polished looking as the setup on the MQ, but I really still like it here. And again, this diffuser is something you only get with the R-Style package. On the regular trim, you get a much more traditional bumper instead. And speaking of the bumper, I have to say this is one serious commitment for a styling package. Usually when you see badges like RS on a Honda or SR on a Nissan, it mostly means slightly nicer wheels, maybe some red stitching inside, small cosmetic touches. But here GAC actually went the extra mile to properly distinguish the higher trim from the regular one. And with all this aggressive styling, it's pretty clear who they are targeting. Younger buyers, college students probably, maybe somewhere around the 16 to 30 age bracket, or really anyone who's young at heart. Someone considering something like a Volkswagen Golf R might actually take a look at this as well. Because the Emzoom is fun, it's aggressive, it's youthful, and it doesn't try to hide that at all. Some purists might not like the styling, pointing out all the bits and pieces that don't serve much of a purpose. But personally, I really do, and I think the styling is impeccable. Now, the big question is, does it drive as sporty and dynamic as it looks? And I'll answer that in a bit. Now, entering the inside, you start off by pulling on the door handles like the ones on the GAC MQ. You get in and you settle into your seating position, and like in the MQ, you can see the ridges on the bonnet, and with time, you're better able to position and gauge distance using those lines. Next, you look to your left, you look to your right, then up top adjusting your mirrors. It's not difficult to see out of all of them because they are quite large and you get a decent view out the back. You then notice that it's unusually bright in the interior. Again, you look to your left, then to your right. The windows are a decent size, however, that can't be the reason why it's so bright in here. You look up to see if the interior lights are on. No, that can't be it. Whoa, hold on. What does this switch do? And then you realize that this car has a sunroof. Pretty neat. You then go to start the car. The start button is to your left. You press it and then your attention is instantly pulled to the gauge cluster screen because of the startup animations. You press a button, whoa, the screen changes. What button did I just press? Was it to the right or to the left? Definitely left. You then realize that the steering wheel fits into your hands quite nicely. It feels nice to hold, a bit on the smaller side but matches the sporty aesthetic of the car, especially with these perforated leather seats. It's a bit snug, but you can play around with the seat. In the screen, you have your normal information, all displayed as it would in any other car. You can switch between having the speed be the most prominent feature or share the screen with the tire temperature and pressure screen. Notably less configurability and animations than in the MQ, but this is fine. And the LED lit templates to the side show your fuel range, RPMs, and engine temps. They're undeniably the stars of the show in my opinion. You then realize that something is poking you in your pocket. You pull it out and realize that it's your phone and wallet. You take them out and place them in this handy rubberized tray that is also a wireless charging dock for your phone. Your attention is then pulled toward the center, which is covered in mesmerizing lines and triangles. You then notice two holes, which are cup holders, and you remember the whole reason why you got into the car in the first place. You told your son you were going to pick up the milk. So you shift your car into drive using the bedazzled crystal switch, and it looks oddly familiar, exactly like the one in the MQ. You grab the steering wheel that's squared off at the bottom, check that it's centered using the line at the top, and you're ready to go. But before you leave, you realize that it's too quiet in here. So you slide out your phone to connect to the Bluetooth system, and the process is simple enough and straightforward. You aren't really feeling the song that's playing, so you switch to the next one. You then start to wonder, what else can this system do? Like in the MQ, you've got your driver aids, your cameras, and then you come to the car BitLink. And you may be wondering, what is this? Well, essentially it's Android screen mirroring because it doesn't come with Android Auto, so you use this instead. So you first have to scan the QR code to download the app, and it redirects you to the website and then to the Play Store. We hit download, and while that's downloading, let's check out some other features in the My Vehicle app. Let's start with the ambient lighting. You can configure a wide range of colors, and they change in this band that's hidden behind the screen and wraps around the front of the interior into the doors. Through the cockpit controls, you can control things like the mirrors, and in the on and off section, you can do things like open all the cabin windows at once, in case your passenger can't hold it in, and we can close them too. Let's check out what else we can do. We can switch between our drive modes with some cool animations. In the drive mode settings though, the only thing you can configure is the steering feel between light, comfort and sport. The rest of your other features are locked. We then come to our camera and you get a 360-degree camera, or you can switch between the cameras individually. We then have the normal stuff like the Bluetooth phone, your radio, your music apps, but they don't display the album artwork, which is a bit of a bummer, and you can play around with the sound settings. You then have your quick settings, and then I let my mind wander off a bit and I discovered you can play around with the car in the screen or double tap the car to go into the car settings. You can also swap it out completely for this green wallpaper. Let's take a look at the climate controls, and they're fairly standard. But one feature I did find cool was that when you adjust the temperature, the ambient lights in the cabin change with it to either blue or red. And to the right, we have a little air quality indicator showing how clean the air is. But you don't have to control them through the screen only, because you have your physical controls here at the bottom. And they feel nice to use, and they are very tactile and responsive. Above that, your hazard warning button and the climate control vents themselves. Let's check to see if our app is done downloading. And almost there. Once it's done, you get a bunch of user agreements and permission prompts. And once you're done, your phone then looks like this. You then have to scan the QR code again, and after some fiddling around, you eventually get there and it's linked. And this is what it looks like. The first thing I try to do is open Google Maps, and more permissions are needed. And then it opens right up. Tilt your phone to the side and it does too. What's happening on the phone is what's happening on the screen too. And this is where the screen mirroring comes in. So great, we can just put the phone down and use the screen, right? Wrong. The only way to control it is through the phone, which is a disappointment and can lead to some distracted driving. Not all the apps are mirrored though, like Spotify, but initially it does require some setting up, and the Spotify app itself is just a bit compromised because I couldn't find all my playlists. Local music just syncs to the music on your phone, and if you go to the apps, all the apps on my phone are there, which you can just choose to mirror, I guess, like Jetpack Joyride, if you wanted to do that for whatever reason. But again, you can only control it through your phone. Android Auto would have been 10 times better. Back to the home screen, and you can slide down the screen for some quick settings, including a black screensaver with a clock. And that should be it for the screen. Check out my video on the GAC Emzoom for the other features in the system. You then decide that you want to get a little something for yourself, but you don't want the missus to see. Well, that's not a problem for you because the car comes with a hidden storage section underneath the center console, along with a USB Type-A, Type-C, and 12-volt charging ports. But nah, there's a chance you might see it, so you settle on the storage bin behind the center console. And no, not the first one, that's a bit too obvious. The second, yeah, this would do. It's also deep enough, but she still might open it, so you look to see if you can fit it in the door bin. You also then take some time to admire the door itself. The controls look a bit generic, but the blue patterns more than make up for it. And then you notice the little details in the speaker covers. You then wipe off the scuff stains from your shoes brushing on the cover, then decide to call it off anyway because you're a bad liar. You then take a minute to appreciate just how nice the interior is from the passenger side all the way to the driver's side. A lot of thought went into this interior. Look at the upper part of the gauge cluster and you'll even notice a visual nod to the center element on the spoiler. The materials feel plasticky in some areas. However, the execution of the entire interior as a whole is great. Everything comes together well. And the story is the same in the back. The doors are pared back identical copy to the one up front with the same patterns and inlays, window controls, door handle and door switch. The seats are also the same as the ones up front, but to those with a bit of an imagination, you notice that the headrests look a lot like the battle droids from Star Wars. Apart from that, you get an air vent, one USB Type-A port, some pockets behind the driver's seat, only behind the driver's seat, and a map light to keep you company. As for practicality, opening the boot is easy. You just double press the key, same as the Emzoom, or open it through the screen as I showed you earlier. Unlike the Emzoom I used for my demonstration, the tailgate is electronically operated. The boot is standard and nothing really stands out. Trying to fit two crates doesn't really work this way or the other, so it can only accommodate one comfortably, with a little bit of extra space left over, which shows you the difference between the Emzoom, which could accommodate 3 crates comfortably, including a 4th on top. Folding down the seats is dead easy. You just push down on the shoulders of the seats and they fold down. And this is what it looks like with the seats down. And with the seats down, you can fit 3 crates on the back seat, and now the boot can accommodate 2 crates because the seats aren't interfering with the space. Now, lifting the seats back up, you do have to be careful with the seat belt because it does get in the way of the folding seat, which interferes with putting the seat back up. So let's just move that out the way. Let's just go around, do the same on the other side. Oh, and look at that, we have a handrest. And we just have to make sure that it's latched, and that's it for the boot. Let's close it up. Now, naturally, with a car like the GAC Emzoom, the next question becomes, what exactly is the competition here? And honestly, unlike the GAC Emco, the Emzoom is actually a lot easier to place because of its size and overall purpose. The competition here is cars like the Honda Vezel, Toyota CHR, and Nissan Magnite. And honestly, that's pretty interesting company to be in because those are some of the most style-focused compact crossovers on the market right now. Now, because the Emzoom only really started production around 2024, I'm also going to try and keep the comparisons relatively fair. So I'm mainly looking at cars around 2023 and upwards because comparing this to something significantly older would be a little unfair, especially the Toyota CHR, which is absolutely everywhere online. If you scroll through Facebook Marketplace long enough, you'll eventually trip over about 12 of them. And the funny thing with the CHR is that Toyota barely changed the design over the years, which is a good thing because it means even older models still look relatively modern today. You genuinely have to stop and check the model year because visually they all blend together quite well. Now, pricing wise, here in Zim, the Emzoom starts around 32,000 for the base model and rises to around 36,000 for the range topping R-Style trim. And remember, that's for a brand new car with delivery mileage. Now compare that to something like a 2023 Honda Vezel. The example I found locally was going for around 34,000 and it didn't even mention the mileage. It simply said recent import, which is basically Zimbabwean dealership language for trust me, bro. And then there's the Toyota CHR, where prices locally are generally floating around the low to mid 20,000 range, with some examples climbing toward 30,000 depending on the condition and spec. But here's the important thing. Those are still used cars with mileage, and that's before we even begin talking about importing one yourself. For example, if you wanted to import a 2023 Toyota CHR with a 1797cc engine and around 24,600 kilometers on the clock, the vehicle itself lands in Dar es Salaam at around 18,000. But once you factor in taxes, border clearance, shipping, and all the other lovely surprises that come with importing a car into Zimbabwe, the total landing cost comes out to roughly 31,000. And again, that's still a used car. The story is similar with the Honda Vezel, a 2023 example with a 1490cc engine and around 45,000 kilometers on the clock lands in Dar es Salaam at a roughly 14,400. But after import costs, taxes, you're looking at a total landing figure of around 25,000, which initially sounds much cheaper than the Emzoom until you remember it's used. It has significant mileage, and depending on the trim, it may not actually feel as well equipped or dramatic as the Emzoom does inside and out. And that's where the Emzoom becomes very interesting. Because yes, the established brands still carry the trust, resale value, and reputation they've built over the decades. Cars like the Toyota CHR and Honda Vezel have already proven themselves globally, and that absolutely counts for something. But the Emzoom fights back with something that those cars often struggle to offer at this price point. Presence, the styling, the interior, the tech, the sense of occasion. Now, driving the Emzoom, it felt more or less the same as driving the Emco, only this felt a little sportier and nimble. First impressions, it has a lot of the same traits as the Emco. The suspension is firmer, however not drastically so. Remember, this is an SUV, so it has to be somewhat a jack of all trades. Regardless of how sporty the exterior may look, it's still an SUV at heart. Potholes and bumps are fairly smoothed out, and it's a comfortable ride overall. When it comes to body roll, this car is notably less, it being smaller than the Emco. However, it's still an SUV, and it's not a low-slung hatchback, but it's still nimble enough to toss around. Like the Emco, the steering is ridiculously light. Now, you can play around with the steering feel like I showed you earlier, but you're going to have to book a test drive to feel exactly just how much it changes according to your own preferences. But it is still responsive. If you turn the wheel, it changes directions. Now, acceleration is also quick. It claims a 0 to 100 time of 7.5 seconds, but honestly, it feels a whole lot quicker than that, and that's delivered from the same 1.5 liter engine as the Emco. Safe to say that you'll get up to highway speeds in no time. And whilst we're on the subject of performance, from what I could find, the R-Style package on the GAC Emzoom is actually more than just cosmetic. It's not a full performance trim in the same way something like a proper hot hatch would be, but GAC did make some meaningful tweaks beyond just orange accents and body kits. What I couldn't find was strong evidence of major mechanical suspension upgrades like stiffer springs, adaptive dampers, lower ride height, upgraded anti-roll bars, or any fundamental differences in suspension setup. They genuinely try to make the R-Style feel different, even if it's still fundamentally a sporty compact SUV rather than a true performance crossover. The transmission is very smooth, but again I have to say there is no way to change gears manually like in the Emco, which is a shame considering the sporty nature of this car. However, it is very responsive. There is virtually no turbo lag whatsoever. Braking is okay when you're stopping, but it does suffer the same drawbacks as the MQ in that it can be grabby at times. Like the MQ, the car wants to lurch forward because they share the same engine. So letting your foot off the brake in traffic to let the car creep forward is a bit of a big no-no at times. And so stopping can feel a bit grabby, but I think you'll be able to smooth this out as time goes on and you learn to time your braking better. It's fairly quiet in the cabin of the car and road noise isn't intrusive at all. The driving aids in the car all work really well in traffic, the adaptive cruise control especially, but only up to a certain speed like in so many other cars. It does have a Sport Plus mode, but remember it mostly plays around with the response of the vehicle when accelerating, so there isn't a world of difference in how the car feels, but it is notably quicker. The GAC Emzoom feels like a company trying hard to make you care about cars again, and I mean that in a good way. So many modern crossovers today feel like appliances, safe, predictable, designed by a committee, but the Emzoom feels like it was designed by people who were told to just have fun with it. And that personality shows everywhere, in the styling, the interior, the lighting, the startup animations, the exhaust, even the tiny details hidden throughout the cabin. Now sure, it's not perfect. The infotainment still has some rough edges, Android Auto should absolutely be here, and the long-term ownership experience is still something GAC has yet to prove over time. But as an overall package, this thing is shockingly compelling. Because when you step back and look at what you're actually getting for the money, especially compared to the used alternatives people are importing, the Emzoom starts to make a lot of sense. It feels modern, it feels youthful, it feels different, and most importantly, it feels like it actually has character. And in a world where so many cars are beginning to feel identical, that alone makes it enough to make the Emzoom worth considering.